I think we need to get convinced of what brings awakened faith is an encounter with a person, with the risen one.
The best of the week on Relevant Radio.
No matter how much you have grown in prayer over the course of your life, there's always room for more growth. This is true because, as the Catechism tells us, the living and true God tirelessly calls each person to that mysterious encounter known as prayer. God, who is not static, is the initiator of prayer, and he initiates out of love. Our prayer is always a response. It is our heart responding to the prompting of the heart of Almighty God that he sends to each of us. Now, that said, we can always grow in responding well to God's promptings. We can develop virtues and habits that help us to pray better and better. And by that, I don't mean just so that we can get whatever we want, whatever we might happen to be praying for, but rather that we can enter ever more deeply into intimacy with the God who made us, loves us, and has a plan for us. So what are those virtues and habits? What can you do to grow in your life of prayer? Today on the show, we'll take a look at foundations of prayer. Joining us for the very first time as a new spiritual director today is Monsignor Thomas Richter. Monsignor Richter is the pastor of Queen of Peace Church in Dickinson, North Dakota, and the author of 3 booklets, Is Jesus Calling You to Be a Catholic Priest?, Lend Your Own Voice to Christ, and Integrated Evangelization. Monsignor, thanks so much for joining us today on The Inner Life.
It's good to be with you, Patrick.
Well, it's great to have you with us, and so grateful that you are specifically talking about this important theme about foundations of prayer. And maybe just an opening question, why is it important to define some foundations when you're developing a prayer life?
Well, precisely because you can pray wrongly. And so it's important that we understand what we mean, what the church means when she talks about prayer. When she talks about prayer, she's talking about Christian relational prayer. And that is basically participating in the prayer in the heart of Christ. We're praying with the heart of Christ, inspired by the same Spirit that inspired his prayer, as opposed to some egocentric act we carry out. So it's important that when we think of prayer, we think of it rightly with a purified Christian imagination. And so before the foundations I'd like to cover with your listeners today, I'd like to just give some general understanding of prayer. So when they hear me say the word prayer, they're thinking of the same thing I mean when I say the word.
Sure.
The Catechism of the Catholic Church in the 4th pillar first describes prayer as a relationship. Not something we do, but a relationship we have. The first paragraph in the Catechism for the 4th chapter is, this mystery requires that the faithful believe in it, that they celebrate it, and that they live from it in a vital and personal relationship with the living and true God. And then it says these beautiful words, this relationship is prayer. So the first thing we need when we think of prayer, if your listeners are like me, when I hear the word prayer, I think of something I do. But first and foremost, it's a relationship I have, much like marriage. Married people do a lot of married things, but they first have a marital relationship before those things they do can be marital things. And so this is the Church's vision for that. To take it one step further, St. Teresa of Avila gives the best definition, or I should say the one I like most with prayer. She says prayer is a frequent heart-to-heart conversation with him whom I know loves me. So for St. Teresa of Avila, you can't pray if you have not been awakened to the love of God for me. Prayer is a frequent heart-to-heart with him who I know, I'm aware of, I've encountered, I've been awakened to his love for me. So prayer is a relationship with one who loves me, and I'm aware of that. And so to pray requires getting beyond relating to God as an idea and as a person who has revealed himself to me, whom I've encountered, who I'm aware of. And it's this relationship that out of which prayer happens. The third kind of general understanding, as you mentioned in your introduction, Patrick, is that the primary actor in prayer is God. Mm-hmm. So when we think of prayer, the focus should be God is the one who does this more than I do it. So what God says in prayer is more important than what I say. What God's doing is more important than what I'm doing. What God is desiring is more important than what I'm desiring. What God is willing is more important than what I'm willing. So when one can start with these general understandings, one can now talk in a Christian way about prayer. Prayer is not a skill set. It's not a technique. It's first and foremost a relationship that is inspired, led by the God who loves me and has made himself known to me. I've come to know and believe in the love God has for me. And lastly, the end of prayer. The end of prayer isn't to fix me or anyone else, although grace does a lot of that sort of spiritual fixing, so to speak. But the end of prayer, what should make one want to pray, is the ultimate end of prayer, and that's union with Christ, union with God, communion with God. And the deepest communion is the communion of wills.
Wow.
So that is kind of the overarching sort of framework out of which I like to speak about prayer. I know that's a lot in a few minutes, Patrick.
I was just thinking we could just unpack that for the rest of the hour, but I know we've got other things to get on.
I haven't gotten to the foundations yet.
That's very good. Monsignor Thomas Richter is with us today as our spiritual director. You're working on a book. You're putting together a book, is that right? And where did this whole idea about 6 foundations of prayer come from?
Yes, well, first of all, it's going to be a very modest book, Patrick.
Okay.
That's the first thing. At the center of the book is going to be these 6 foundations.
Got it. Okay, so we're getting a little schooling going on today here, a little class time. I like that.
You're right. You're right.
That's very good. That's very good. So, what is the first foundation of prayer, Monsignor?
The first foundation for prayer that I like to present is what I call awakened faith. Awakened faith. Prayer only happens by faith. Faith prays, and only faith prays. I only pray to the degree I have faith. Prayer is an activity of faith. It's first of all a relationship of faith, and then within that relationship, faith does this great activity called prayer. So prayer requires faith, and in order to grow in prayer, one must grow in faith. Otherwise, I'm just praying out of my ego. I'm just doing a human thing. If I don't have faith, whatever I'm doing, whatever's going on in my mind, whatever's going on isn't prayer, because prayer can only be done by faith and what I call awakened faith. What I mean by awakened faith, contrasting it with unawakened faith would relate to God as an idea, maybe truths.
Sure.
Would think truths, ideas, concepts, even teachings. But the primary thing unawakened faith does is it thinks. And it thinks about these ideas, thinks about these truths, thinks about these concepts, thinks about these teachings. And that isn't a bad thing. Unawakened faith isn't a bad thing. It's just terribly incomplete and insufficient. What I mean by awakened faith is different. Awakened faith relates to the mysteries of God through lived experience. One who has awakened faith has the lived experience of the mysteries of God, and largely the mystery of God himself. And so awakened faith has met someone.
Okay.
Awakened faith happens by meeting someone. What Pope Benedict so famously named and is now being used by everyone everywhere is encounter. And so awakened faith knows God as a real person. And the primary thing awakened faith does isn't think, but relates. The primary thing faith does, awakened faith, is relates to the one who's with me. Awakened faith is with the one who is with me, relates to the one who is relating to me, is aware of an I-thou relationship. Its primary activity is not thinking about someone, but rather being with and being loved by that someone who is real to me, present to me, active in me. this awakened faith is the foundation of prayer. And really, without it, I cannot engage Christian relational prayer. Are you familiar, Patrick, and I trust your listeners, are familiar with Sherry Waddell?
Yes, very much so.
Forming Intentional Disciples, yeah. And she makes this distinction between being sacramentalized, catechized, and evangelized.
Yep.
And she says what is a real concern today in the church is we have people who are sacramentalized and catechized, but not evangelized. Mm-hmm. They have not encountered the good news. Who is a person? If I understand her rightly, what I mean by unawakened faith would be sacramentalized and catechized, but not yet evangelized. They have not met the risen one, not encountered him in a meaningful, real way.
Mm-hmm. Right. I can understand that, Monsignor. And so if one is listening right now and just hearing what you're saying about awakened faith, maybe they have a question of, well, do I have awakened faith? Or if not, how do I get awakened faith? Or what is that seminal moment then when one receives that awakened faith?
Yeah, well, those are the right questions, Patrick. That's why you do what you do. You're asking the right questions. I think, well, first of all, I think we need to get convinced of what brings awakened faith is an encounter with a person, with the risen one. Pope Benedict in his, I love this definition he gave with this audience on October in 2009, he said, faith is first and foremost a personal, intimate encounter with Jesus. Mm. It's having an experience of his friendship, his closeness, and his love. Mm. And it is only in this way that we can come to know him better and love him more. So it is important that we first get convinced that the Lord wants this, and for that desire to grow in us, this desire for God, this desire to know him, this desire to meet him, this desire to surrender to him. I think if one has an awakened faith, one can answer with certain amount of specificity this question: where did you experience the presence of God today? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did God love you today?
Okay. Yeah.
What's your lived experience of God's presence this week?
Mm-hmm. Those are good questions.
Those sort of things, I think, can be a real indicator of the degree of awakened faith. That is not to say that, right, one with awakened faith has this necessarily sensible awareness of all the time of the presence of the Lord, but that one can point to all kinds of concrete lived experience that happened in this place at this time on this day in these circumstances. Yeah. So when I was vocation director for 11 years, and I would visit the seminaries and the seminarians at each seminary every year, when I met individually with the guys, that would be my question. So tell me where you experience the love of God.
Yeah.
And that they
Powerful.
need to know, they need to be able to answer that with some specificity.
Hi, this is Patrick Conley. You can join me and listen on the Relevant Radio app to The Inner Life, live each weekday at 11 a.m. Central. And thanks for listening.